All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, I want to tell all of you thank you for your tremendous support. People are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which we speak. But as we always say here at Chin Check Sports Radio, we do this because we love it, as we are simply sharing our passion with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. Before we get started, we definitely want to say rest in power to one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time, the recently passed away Larry Allen, who died at the age of 52. Definitely gone too soon. We definitely had a privilege of watching this guy from his rookie season and throughout his career. The famous play on Monday Night Football as a rookie right tackle, starting in place of one Eric Williams. And what's ironic is what Larry Allen became is what Eric Williams was supposed to be before the car crash. Running down the New Orleans Saints linebacker off after an interception. And we watched this guy go up against some of the best defensive players of all time. I'm talking about going head up against a Reggie White, head up against a John Randall, Warren Sapp, Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan. And Justin Tuck once famously said that Larry Allen would tell him where the play was coming to, and you couldn't stop it. So definitely to the family of Larry Allen, you have our deepest sympathies on your loss, and we hope that time may heal all your wounds. But segueing from what a Justin Tuck said about a Larry Allen, is something that we have been working on for a little while now. The most unstoppable weapons in professional sports. Things that you just can't stop. And we're talking about no matter how you game plan, no matter how you practice and prepare, how much film you watch, there's some things that you just cannot stop. What is a powerful weapon? And it's something that, as you see on your screen, we decided to take a United States military, a thing that can't be stopped, why it's so powerful, and wanted to put that into professional sports. Now, we're not baseball fans. We hardly discuss anything on this particular show or platform about baseball, because you hear from baseball fans that a Nolan Ryan fastball was unstoppable, a Randy Johnson slider was unstoppable, anything from Greg Smoltz was unstoppable, the famous Braves pitchers of the 1990s, and I forget all their names, Greg Maddux, you tend to hear Barry Bonds was unstoppable. So we're going to give baseball their just due, but we're going to confine it to the sports that we generally talk about all the time. And we're going to begin in the world of mixed martial arts. Folks, the Jon Jones ground and pound, was that unstoppable? We certainly think so. We certainly know that Jon Jones is the greatest MMA fighter of all time. Transgressions be damned, this guy is the truth. And folks, when you ever watch a Jon Jones fight, when he took somebody down to the ground, you pretty much knew that person was going to be in for a battering on the ground. His large frame, wingspan, his ability to generate ground and pound power inside somebody's guard, and it's going against top-level black belts in the UFC. And he beat the brakes of all of them. If Jon Jones wanted to take you down, you were getting taken down. Now, he could hold off on the takedown for so long, say maybe the first Gustafsson fight. But other than that, when Jon Jones made an effort to take you down to the ground, you were going down to the ground, and you were going to get the brakes beaten off of you. Now, with Jon Jones, his ground and pound was used to wear you down, obviously to win a fight, to beat you in ground and pound, wear you down eventually in the later rounds, or set up submissions from the ground and pound. So this guy was a troop, should be undefeated. His only one loss happens to be a disqualification, landing illegal elbows. Whether people agree with it or not, that was a rule. And however, that was in the ground and pound after he took Matt Hamill to the ground and started to beat the brakes off of him. So Jon Jones ground and pound is definitely something that's unstoppable, no matter how you train, no matter what you do. When Jon Jones took you down and proceeded to ground and pound you, there was nothing you could do. So you couldn't stop the takedown, and you definitely couldn't avoid the ground and pound. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Folks, you want to tell me you can stop his takedowns? You knew, every fighter knew, when you fought Khabib, he was going for the takedown. Fans knew it. Everybody knew that before you can say jumping jack flash, Khabib was trying to take his opponents down. Go back and watch that Conor McGregor fight. You saw him taking Conor McGregor down at will. And clearly Conor McGregor was doing his best to plan, avoid takedowns. He clearly spent time trying to fight the takedown. He could only avoid a takedown for the first maybe 30 seconds. And other than that, it was Khabib taking him down at will and holding him down. Again, a Khabib Nurmagomedov who resulted in being 29-0, the longest reigning lightweight champion of all time in a 3-year span, and retired undefeated. Already is a UFC Hall of Famer. And go back to a fight against once Abel Trujillo at UFC 60 in May of 2017. Khabib scored 21 out of 28 attempts, which is a UFC record. Let that sink in. And before we continue, a lot of stuff that we're talking about, especially the things that are unstoppable, do not text us and call us and say, well, Chin Check, we can show you time that it was stopped. Of course, nothing is going to be perfect. There's going to be some things that a person can thwart for the time being, but we're talking about things that have proven to be successful, and we're going to give you the reasons why they were successful and the things that resulted in titles, championships, accolades. So we understand that, fighters have lost. We understand that things have been stifled. We're talking about what generally has been successful, that you know what a team is going to do, or an individual in this case. So this brings us back to the Gracie Guard, Royce Gracie. Folks, when Royce Gracie hit the scene in the first UFC was something that unlike the world has ever seen. Now, of course, in Brazil, they were doing that for sport and guys training. Now, ourselves being a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, training under guys who are from Brazil, training in guys who train in Rio and other places. Of course, it was more concentrated in certain areas. But once Royce Gracie hit the scene, you saw the explosion of jiu-jitsu. Now, folks, you knew what Royce Gracie wanted to do. He wanted to take it to the ground and he wanted to get you in the guard. Not only score a takedown, but pull you in guard against bigger, larger wrestlers and utilize his technique, his gis to get submissions. Again, in UFC 1, Ken Shamrock, with a lot of fanfare, great grappling in his own right, submitted in the first round. Stormed through everybody in the first couple of UFCs. With exception of UFC 3, he was injured, but pretty much was beating the brakes off of everybody. In UFC 4, fought the great Dan Severn. 16 minutes that Severn spent inside of his guard and utilized a triangle choke. And again, you knew what Royce Gracie wanted to do, and it was nothing that a fighter can do with it. It's almost like you were just just drowning in quicksand. There was nothing that you can do to stop a Royce Gracie guard, especially in the early days of the UFC. So for mixed martial arts, definitely you have things that were unstoppable that you knew you could train for, and there was nothing that you can do about it. In the world of professional boxing, you know how we get down. You know what? Yeah, we'll stay with boxing because we do have other sports. In the world of professional boxing, folks, you want to tell me that Larry Holmes' jab wasn't unstoppable? You knew what Larry Holmes wanted to do. Larry Holmes, former heavyweight champion, 75 total fights, 69 wins, 44 wins by knockout, and only 6 losses. Folks, Larry Holmes was 48-0 before he suffered his first loss. That's how great this guy was, who really doesn't get talked about that much. Who tends to get overlooked because you pretty much have this gap with Ali and Tyson that people act like it didn't exist. So the end of Muhammad Ali, the rise of Mike Tyson, you had the Larry Holmes era. And Larry Holmes was that guy. We did a broadcast about him, speaking on Larry Holmes' greatness, and we believe that Larry Holmes actually heard our broadcast and actually shouted us out on that. So definitely much respect to him. But folks, that Larry Holmes jab to this day is considered one of the best jabs of all time in boxing history. Not just heavyweight history, in boxing history was that Larry Holmes jab. Another fighter want to throw his jab in there is one Lennox Lewis. And one Lennox Lewis was physically bigger than Larry Holmes. We had the pleasure of meeting Lennox Lewis a few times. Very nice guy. Lennox Lewis of 44 total fights, 41 wins, 32 big wins by knockout, 2 losses, and 1 draw. You saw Lennox Lewis was ranked number 4 in our top 10 fighters of all time that we grew up watching. So we're going to give Lennox Lewis all his credit in the world. Another hard, thudding jab that controlled the action, kept fighters at bay. Go back and watch those Holyfield fights, kept Holyfield at bay, and you have to go through a lot. When I tell you a lot, to get to Lennox Lewis. And by the way, if you got through that hard jab, the right hand was waiting on you. And if you happen to make it through the right hand, the uppercut was waiting on you. So definitely want to give our shout outs to those jabs right there. Felix Tito Trinidad. Folks, you knew Tito had a left hook. Now, of course, you're going to think of a Joe Frazier left hook, but we didn't watch Joe Frazier, so we watched Felix Trinidad. And we mentioned how big of a star Trinidad was. Trinidad with his left hook, 45 total fights, 42 big wins by knockout. 42 wins, 35 wins by knockout, and 3 losses. Folks, go back and watch the Maurice Blocker fight when he knocked Maurice Blocker unconscious to win the IBF welterweight championship. Go back and watch the Fernando Vargas fight. That was an underrated classic when he clocked Vargas in the opening round with that left hook, when he moved up to 160 and beat up William Joppy around Madison Square Garden based off that left hook. Folks, you knew Trinidad had that left hook. You know the power off the left hook. And there was nothing that most fighters could stop it. They would just walk right into the Trinidad artillery. Fighters would prepare for it, and they would get clocked with that right hand, and that was the ultimate game changer in most prize fights during the time of Felix Tito Trinidad. So definitely want to give his just due on his left hook that you knew you had to avoid, you knew you had to stay away from, and in some cases that you knew you shouldn't be taking. But fighters still was hit with it, and it was just a beautiful thing. The left hook to the body of a Julio Cesar Chavez. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., 107 wins, 6 losses, and 2 draws. Folks, did you know that Julio Cesar Chavez went 89-0 with 1 draw and went undefeated in 90 fights before his first loss? All that was based off that left hook to the body. I mean, devastating. That seems to be a staple of Mexican fighters, is that left hook to the body. Canelo throws an excellent left hook to the body now. We're talking about in that era, you knew what Chavez wanted to do. And even knowing Chavez's style, you knew Chavez wanted to come ahead and charge straight ahead. You know Chavez wanted to make it a brawl. You know Chavez wanted to do his damage up close. And yet fighters could not do anything with Chavez. Folks, Joe Galsaghi's hand speed. The former super middleweight champion, 46-0, 32 KOs, and we mentioned this on previous broadcasts, one of the few champions and fighters to retire undefeated. You know that Joe Galsaghi had tremendous hand speed, and there was nothing you could do with it. Just the way that Galsaghi would square his shoulders and let those punches flow. Jim Lampley once said it was a flow like musical rhythm, and it was a beautiful thing. The way he put his punches together, his stamina, his conditioning, the man did not seem to get tired, and the man threw the proverbial punches and bunches, and later on in his career, beat the next fighter we're going to mention, Bernard Hopkins. But we definitely want to give Joe Galsaghi credit, his unstoppable hand speed. You knew the hand speed was there. You knew that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to throw the punches and bunches, and fighters could not stop it. Bernard Hopkins' right hand. 67 total fights, 55 wins, 32 wins by KO, 8 losses, 2 draws, and 2 no contests. Now, the Bernard Hopkins that most people know is a Bernard Hopkins who was 36 and above post the Felix Trinidad fight. But people forget the career that a Bernard Hopkins had when he was just, yes, he was a destroyer. But of course, after the Trinidad fight, we're talking about wins over Winky Wright, Roy Jones in a rematch, Antonio Tarver, Kelly Pavlik, Jean Pascal, and we're talking fights that he was the underdog in. And if you know that Bernard's one weapon was that straight right hand, that target, laser-like right hand, and fighters couldn't do anything with it. You knew Bernard's style. Take his time on offense, throw a few punches here and there, and then unleash that straight right hand. Go look at the third Robert Allen fight when he uncorked that right hand like a fastball, turned Robert Allen around and dropped him. I mean, that was just a beautiful fastball that he threw, and Bernard was that guy. And again, fighters knew what he wanted to do. His style was a rough style. You knew that he wanted to make a rough and tumble fight, hit on the inside, hit the body, but you knew that right hand is what you had to worry about, and yet people could not stop the Bernard Hopkins right hand. So that was a Chin Check Sports Radio unstoppable move in boxing that we watched growing up. Now, the next fighter, a lot of things that he did was unstoppable, but we're going to break down one thing. Floyd Mayweather, his shoulder roll. Folks, you knew that Floyd Mayweather was going to come with that shoulder roll. Now, a lot of fighters try to imitate that, but it's not the same. James Toney has some, but James Toney had been around for a long time. I mean, obviously before Floyd Mayweather had been around. So it's really a Midwestern technique, and Floyd growing up in Grand Rapids, James Toney from nearby, well, Flint, I'm going to say he's nearby, but in Flint, Michigan. And Floyd Mayweather, his shoulder roll technique that fighters knew that's what he wanted to employ, especially on defense. Again, I can break down a lot of things that Floyd did that fighters couldn't touch. His right hand, everything, his footwork. But we definitely want to talk about the shoulder roll and definitely talk about, and we watched a ESPN Sports Science, the old show that actually broke down scientifically how effective the shoulder roll was. The shoulder roll with Floyd Mayweather, he was able to counter off of that by making his body smaller. And the way it's broken down, he reduced his body size almost by 50%. He was able to move his head back on defense, which was at the same speed or the same acceleration that LaShawn McCoy, the famous running back, would do when trying to avoid a tackle. Folks, they said that Floyd Mayweather's opponents landed 40% lower against him than in their average fights. That's how great the shoulder roll was. And if Floyd was hit, the deceleration forced minimized impact about 60%. So when you talk about scientifically how great the shoulder roll was and fighters couldn't stop it, again, go back to the Canelo Alvarez fight when Floyd Mayweather was using the shoulder roll and was catching Alvarez on a quick counter, where he would roll with the punch, boom, okay, come back with it. So when you hear roll the punches, it's pretty much what Floyd Mayweather did with the shoulder roll. It was unstoppable, fighters knew it, and he couldn't do a damn thing. Floyd would kind of lean back, again, taking that power off the punches where he's not taking them full bore. You could think of maybe one fight where Floyd was clocked clean, and that was the Shane Mosley fight that we had the pleasure of being there. And people forget, they make a big deal out of that second round, and Mosley won the round big. But Floyd came back and swept every round and pretty much took Mosley's offense away. And it's one of those, with the shoulder roll, even trying to hit his body, again, we talked about Floyd made his body smaller. He pretty much like reduced the size of his target size to almost 40-50%. Again, moving his head back with the acceleration was the same way that LaShawn McCoy would take a cut to avoid a tackle. So again, this guy, Floyd Mayweather, shoulder roll defense, there's nothing that you can do to stop it. In the National Basketball League, folks, could you really stop Shaquille O'Neal? Could you really stop the Diesel? Could you really stop Shaq Daddy? Shaquille O'Neal from the Orlando Magic going to the Lakers. We're talking about peak Shaquille O'Neal and really even going back to the Magic. Could you really stop Shaq in the paint? When Shaq got the ball, just get out of his way, and Shaq could power you, had excellent footwork, had a nice little jump hook. There was nothing that you could do to stop Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, folks, there's nothing you could do to stop Shaquille O'Neal. I'll say this again. A Shaq in the paint, we're not talking shooting free throws. A Shaq in the paint was too powerful that guys couldn't deal with him. That's why they tried to draw him out. That's why guys had shooters. They could not do anything with a Shaq in the paint. Folks, Shaquille O'Neal is the most dominant offensive player that I've ever seen. We did not grow up watching Wilt Chamberlain, but we grew up watching Shaq. And Shaq was the most unstoppable offensive player that we have ever seen. There was nothing you could do with Shaq. His size, his strength, his underrated mobility. Shaq was that dude. Folks, the triangle offense. Now Phil Jackson is credited with the triangle offense. Historically, it really comes from a USC coach, Sam Barry, who Tex Winter played under, who gave it to Phil Jackson, of course, and Phil Jackson employed the triangle technique to win 11 championships. We'll say this again, 11 championships. 6 with the Bulls, including 2 three-peats, a three-peat with the Lakers, and another back-to-back with the Lakers. Now, what was the key to the triangle offense? Some of the keys to the triangle offense was, on one side, it created a triangle. The center at the low post, the forward at the wing, and the guard at the corner. The triangle offense, it created space, and it pretty much pushed ball movement. Now, when Michael Jordan was coming up and playing under Doug Collins, why they couldn't beat the Pistons, because they played heavy isolation basketball, because again, Jordan with his amazing gifts, Doug Collins thought that would be enough until the Pistons beat the brakes off of them. The triangle offense comes, you have more ball movement, you have the rise of Scottie Pippen, and of course, they end up sweeping the Pistons, and of course, which began the Bulls dynasty. Of course, it wasn't a fluke in Chicago because it worked in Los Angeles. So the triangle offense, you knew what they wanted to do, and it was nothing that you could do with it. So if you ask yourself with Chin Check Sports Radio, why don't people not utilize the triangle offense now? Very simple. We are a three-point shooting NBA. Guys have more range. Guys shoot more jumpers. There's not really a whole lot of inside game. You very rarely see a lot of ball movement. It's a lot of isolation game with your best players. So that's just what it is now in the NBA, why you don't see a lot, well, really any version of the triangle offense being used. But for its time, it was there for its time. It was nothing that you can possibly do. We definitely want to give credit to a Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan fadeaway. Folks, you do Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, you can play excellent defense on them. Again, there was many things out of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan's game that you really couldn't stop. But we had to pick and choose here. You can play great defense on them. They'll spin around and they'll hit the fadeaway right over you. You can body them up and they'll hit the fadeaway over you. If you had enough footwork to match them, enough foot speed to match them, they'll definitely hit the fadeaway over you. And folks, you couldn't stop it. I'm talking about hit the fadeaway right in your face. LeBron James driving the football. Listen to us at Chin Check Sports Radio. LeBron James driving the basketball. Folks, till this day, you still can't stop LeBron James. When he puts his head down and drives to the basket, okay, trust me, folks, like you can't stop it. And this is, again, a LeBron James that's hitting 40 years old, or if he's 40 already. So either way, an older LeBron James, he can put his head down, drive the ball to the basket, and there's nothing that you can do. And a guy at his size, his weight, with his acceleration, there's nothing that you can do. And lastly, when we're to basketball, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sky hook. Folks, the sky hook was a beautiful thing. When you go back and watch YouTube clips of Kareem with the sky hook, I mean, just swish net. I mean, you knew it was coming. You knew he had the ball, and it was as sweet out of his hand, a flick of the wrist, and the ball was all net. Now, I know folks say famously that Wilt Chamberlain and maybe Manute Bol, both of them are deceased, and rest in power to both of them, have blocked the shot. Again, we said this earlier. We're not talking about things that are totally unstoppable. It is not the irresistible force, meaning immovable object, but it's one of those, it worked all the time. Because why did it work? Until LeBron James broke the all-time scoring record, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar held the all-time scoring record for damn near 40 years. So that worked. Clearly, the skyhook worked, and you knew that's what Kareem wanted to do. From when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks winning titles, going to the Lakers. You cannot stop the skyhook. And ironically, to prevent Kareem from dunking the basketball, which is a ridiculous rule, Kareem perfected a skyhook, which probably gave his career more longevity because you don't have the slam and all the impact on your knees and stuff like that. But the Kareem skyhook, folks, there wasn't a damn thing that you can do with that. So, folks, that was a very unstoppable weapon. I think in most fantasy matchups, if you'd have pit those Laker teams against most modern teams, you can maybe match up against a Magic Johnson, match up against maybe this person, but could you really match up against the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the sky hook? Even against a Shaq, I think Kareem would have sky hooked him out the building. So it's one of those, that's just what it is. You really couldn't stop the sky hook. Going to the NFL. Well, we'll talk about something that's unstoppable that we see every Sunday now. The brotherly push in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts, when the Eagles are at short yardage, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, definitely you know that Jalen Hurts is going to line up and somebody's going to push him forward. The offensive line is going to get low and they're going to push him, and that play is rarely stopped. We'll stop him a few times last season, but the play is rarely stopped. You know they want to do, and you can't stop it, to the point where there was actually talk of actually banning the actual rule. And the rule was not banned this year. So guess what the Eagles are probably going to do? Same thing with the tush push. They're definitely not going to have teams, kind of game plan against them. The way to do that against the Philadelphia Eagles is to keep them out of short yardage situation. So you definitely don't want to have them at a 3rd and 1, at a 4th and 1. You want to keep them at, 3rd and 3, stuff like that. So you definitely want to keep them away from long yardage situations so they don't have to implement the brotherly push. Again, you have the city of Philadelphia. We have the tush push, the bush push, but it's basically called the brotherly push because the city of Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love. I don't know about that part, but that's what they call the city of Philadelphia. So you really can't stop that, and it's something that's becoming an unstoppable weapon in the NFL. We're going to give credit to Coach Joe Gibbs. Now, folks, when you think of all-time great coaches, you generally hear of Vince Lombardi. You generally hear Bill Parcells and Jimmy Johnson and Bill Belichick. But Joe Gibbs tend to gets overlooked, and Joe Gibbs has a 62 winning percentage in the regular season, a 71 winning percentage in the postseason, won Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, and you figure, how did he win it with 3 different quarterbacks? Well, a staple of his offense was a counter trade with the Hogs. The Hogs, you had left tackle Joe Jacoby, you had Mark May at guard, Russ Grimm at guard, you had Jeff Bostic at center, and you had George Stark at tackle. And what was the staple of that offense? The counter trade. The misdirection play where the lineman would block down and the backside guard and tackle would take off to go look for people to hit, and you could not stop that play. Again, when you have 3 different quarterbacks, that means the offensive line, the Hogs, and one of Rob more of them are not in the Hall of Fame. Only Russ Grimm is the only Hall of Famer. But those guys were going after people. And we go back to a game that the Cowboys played against the former Washington Redskins, December of 2005. And DeMarcus Ware was a rookie that year. And the Cowboys are trying to fight for a playoff spot. They're trying to get playoff seeding. And the Redskins ran the Hogs of the Cowboys and beat the brakes off of them. I guess Parcells really didn't plan for that. But definitely, you couldn't stop that counter trade. Again, those teams in the 80s, you really couldn't stop them. And with the Hogs, there wasn't a damn thing you could do about it. Which brings us next to the Vince Lombardi power sweep. The Vince Lombardi power sweep, you always hear see the famous video of him on the chalkboard talking about, we want to get a block here, want to get a block here, want to get a seal here, and want to create an alleyway up there. You couldn't stop it. You knew it was coming with Hall of Famer Jerry Kramer, the late Jerry Kramer, a Fuzzy Thurston, and they would pretty much have blocking lanes for Paul Hornung. I forget the other running back, but that was a staple of the Lombardi offense, was a power sweep. John Madden included it when he was at the time coaching the Raiders. He included that in his offense. Again, we have 3 Hall of Famers and Jim Otto and Gene Upshaw and Art Shell. You're kind of able to do that, so definitely want to give him credit. James Jumpy Gathers. Now, people are saying, why is this guy coming up? James Jumpy Gathers. He's not in the Hall of Fame. We don't know who he is. James Jumpy Gathers utilized a pass rush technique called the forklift, where he would literally pick up the offensive lineman and throw him and literally dump him on the quarterback. Folks, you couldn't stop it. There's an ESPN clip that Mark Schlereth talks about this when they were teammates with the former Washington Redskins back in the early 90s. And go back and watch the clip on ESPN. Will tell you there was nothing he could do. They said Jumpy Gathers would tell his offensive lineman, I'm going to do the forklift to you in practice, and there was nothing that you can do. And Jumpy Gathers, about 6'7", 6'8", 290 pounds, long arms, would literally wrap his hands around the offensive lineman, pick them up physically, and just dump them on the quarterback. He was an all-Madden team back in 94. We had the pleasure of meeting Jumpy Gathers. Of course, you know, all his nephews who played in the NFL. Very nice guy. The family are very nice people. But that was an unstoppable move. There was nothing he could do with that. Spanning career of the Saints, again, the Redskins, the Falcons, and the Broncos. Won 2 Super Bowls. It was nothing that you can do with the Jumpy Gathers forklift. Folks, could you stop a Barry Sanders shake? When Barry Sanders got the ball in his hand and Barry Sanders put the juke move on you, folks, there was nothing you can do with Barry Sanders. One of the damn thing you can do with that, man. Once he put the shakes on you, and there's numerous videos of Barry Sanders had guys running in circles. You got Barry in open space, you literally was getting shaken out your cleats. And famously, Rod Woodson, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, Barry Sanders made him tear his ACL and miss the whole season. And the only reason why Rod Woodson is considered the first player to play in the season after tearing his ACL because the Steelers won the Super Bowl that year. You couldn't stop a Barry Sanders shake. No matter what you did, there was nothing that you do to stop it. Randy Moss. Folks, could you stop a Randy Moss go route? To be honest with ourselves, could we stop a Randy Moss go route? No, you couldn't. No, you couldn't. Randy Moss, coming out of Marshall, going to the Vikings. Since day one he stepped into the NFL, there was nothing to do with Randy Moss. He could run past you and he could out-jump you. I always say this, Jerry Rice is still considered the greatest wide receiver of all time. But Randy Moss, when we're talking about, is one of the most gifted players of all time, I don't even think it's up for debate. Terrell Owens, some people have a TO over Randy Moss. We did a broadcast on who's the greatest wide receiver of all time. But Randy Moss revolutionized the game of football. By revolutionized it, do you notice now you have a lot more athletic corners in the league now? Guys that are 6'1", 6'2", running 4.3s and 4.4s. You can trace that back to Randy Moss back in 98. That's when you have the rise of guys like Antonio Cromartie and other tall cornerbacks who can match up against a Randy Moss. So you wonder, obviously the Rods are covered too. You want to have a spy on Randy Moss. And Randy Moss, again, 982 catches, 15,292 yards, and 156 touchdowns will show you that Randy Moss was unstoppable in the NFL, especially that goal route. Let's go back to his first year in New England. Breaking the NFL touchdown record with 23. There was nothing you can do to stop a Randy Moss, especially when he decided, how you call it, folks, getting mossed. That's a term. He got mossed. The famous clip on the sideline with Randy Moss saying, throw the ball up, and golly, he can't jump with me. Randy Moss was that dude. Something that I've never seen before, I've never seen since. Yes, you have great wide receivers, the Megatrons and the Marvin Harrises and the T.O.s and the Steve Smiths, but Randy Moss was just something that he literally looks head and shoulders above other professional athletes. We said this, making the NFL is not easy. It's one of the hardest things to do statistically. But Randy Moss, he was head and shoulders above other guys since his rookie season. There wasn't a damn thing that you could do with one Randy Moss. Lastly, and of course, I want to show a little bit of bias here. The Dallas Cowboys lead draw. There was nothing that you can do to stop the Dallas Cowboys lead draw. We are a Cowboys family. We know we talk about the Cowboys, good, bad, or indifferent, and you could not stop that lead draw or the power O. And the lead draw was linemen man-on-man with that massive offensive line with the late Mark Tuinei and Nate Newton, then Mark Stepnoski and Larry Allen and Derek Kennard and John Giesick and Eric Williams. There wasn't a damn thing you can do when they decided to go hat on a hat, drive you off the ball. Here comes Daryl Moose Johnston. Here comes Daryl Moose Johnston hitting the middle linebacker, and here comes Emmitt Smith picking which lane he wanted to go to. And it was a thing of beauty. The lead draw. You couldn't stop it. And folks, the lead draw resulted from the time, even the time where Daryl Johnson was on the team. So I'm just taking where Daryl Johnson played. 12,566 yards, 4 rushing titles, 3 times the league leading touchdowns, and the most attempts. Folks, you couldn't do a damn thing with that play. You knew it was coming. Larry Allen even said, I believe, again, Justin Tuck once said that Larry Allen will go choo-choo and will know that the train is coming, and you couldn't stop it. Emmitt Smith, in his football life, when they were down against the Buffalo Bills and the Bills had shut down the running game, they said Jimmy Johnson told the team and said, hey, guys, you know what they're doing. Offensive line, you get ready. And Emmitt Smith came out and said, I was telling them, run power O, run it till they stop it. And I believe on the first, 9 possessions in the opening drive of the second half, Emmitt Smith touched the ball, 8 times, and eventually resulted in a touchdown. Completely changed the momentum of the game. So the Cowboys knew with that lead draw, that offensive line, let's go Cowboys fans, let's go now, let's reminisce. Lined up, lead draw, Daryl Johnson takes the fullback, he takes a linebacker, and you have Emmitt Smith will find his holes. And eventually, your defensive line was going to wear down. It was nothing that you could do to stop it. Oh, man, it's a beautiful thing. Some other honorable mentions we'll talk about is the late Reggie White, the one-arm club. That big old massive arm that he had. He would club somebody. Just throw him over to the side. And the Denver Broncos, their running scheme or the zone blocking, where how many seasons did they have 1,000-yard rushers from Terrell Davis to Orlandis Gary to Reuben Drones to Clinton Portis. There was another guy, another running back, I believe in 02. The guy was a Marine, and I totally forget his name. But for a minute there, that was an unstoppable, run scheme. Didn't really result in a playoff win, so we definitely had to give an honorable mention to that. But definitely Reggie White with that one-arm toss, where he would kind of use leverage and use his one arm to throw another offensive lineman. But definitely was a fun broadcast. Definitely let us know what you think. If we missed anything, I'm sure we didn't miss something. But definitely let us know, definitely in the comment section, what are some things that you think that are unstoppable plays, athletes, things in professional sports that you knew you had to prepare for and that couldn't be stopped. If you definitely want to shoot us an email, we're at chinchecksportsradio@gmail.com. Once again, chinchecksportsradio@gmail.com. Until next time, it's Chin Check Sports Radio. Signing out.